My name is Peter Harriman. I work for the Maine Small Business Development Center, and we're helping host the Maine Export Week. As you see the flyer on your screen, May 9th to May 12th, pretty much 11:30 on for each of these days. We're going to be having certain programs that highlight Export Week and how important it is and to help you out with that. And we have a good program today with panelists to get started to talk about exports and how it helped their business. But before we get there, some things to get out of the way is that this is going to be recorded and then the recording will be sent afterwards. If you have a question, then by all means feel free to especially put the question in the chat. And I'm going to send a chat right now, so everyone's chat should kind of blink if you don't know where the chat is. So feel free to put it in chat. We have a relatively small group, so you could always try to raise your hand and unmute yourself, but the chat's better because then we can read it as someone's talking and then get to that question once there's a pause in the discussion. Otherwise, I hope you have a good meeting, and I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to stop share and turn it over to Brad Curry.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. My name is Brad Curry. I am the Senior Area Manager for the SBA Maine District Office. I cover York and Cumberland County. I'm also the District International Trade Officer covering the entire state as well. Today we have three great small business exporters that are going to be sharing their stories with us. But to get it started off, I'd like to introduce our regional administrator, Mike Vlasic. Mike, would you please go ahead and take over?
Thanks, Brad. Thank you and Diane and the SBA team and all our partners for all the work you do. And happy World Trade Month. This is the perfect time to point out the importance of U.S. businesses exporting and point out the benefits of engaging in international trade. It's one of the most rapidly growing and changing sectors of the U.S. economy. First, a little background data. In 2019, a total of 1,836 identified firms exported goods worth $2.4 billion from Maine. Of those exporters, 83% were small. Small firms exported about $1.3 billion, which is about 52% of exports. It's a pretty remarkable number. The point is, there's a big market for goods exported from the US, especially now as we emerge from the global pandemic. Demand for our products and services is on the rise, and continued opportunities in global markets and federal government export assistance have helped many US companies stay successful in recent years. We all know we live in a trade-driven economy, and in today's global interconnected economy, it's no surprise that there's major sales opportunities. I mean, 96% of consumers live outside of the US, and 2/3 of the world's purchasing power is in foreign countries. Businesses looking to pivot and recover after the pandemic could really benefit from exporting, and it's a good way to find a new revenue stream. And we try to make that easier and more accessible for you through SBA, and quite frankly, there's an array of federal agencies like Department of Commerce as well that can support you and our resource partners that are on the call here today. For small businesses and lenders that support them, becoming an active participant in this trade economy, as I mentioned, presents a tremendous growth opportunity. Businesses that export are more resilient. They're less dependent on one market, and exporting stabilizes sales for those who make seasonal products. And the reality is that we have a number of resources. You're going to hear about them today. You can obviously always go to our website, sba.gov. You will learn about logistics, the best practices around those, information about trade laws and regulations. These seminars and these sessions that you have upcoming can really help not only so that you hear the information, but you can ask questions. And then we have people on the ground, like Brad in the Maine district office, and then Joe Raycraft that you're going to hear from, who's our international trade specialist. He covers New England. So again, You'll hear about different acronyms and programs, like our STEP program, our State Trade Expansion program, and our Export Express Loan program. I know that for some who are well versed on this, the acronyms are manageable, but for those of you that are new to this, again, we have people that can help you through this. I have seen firsthand for over 25 years now, my home state is New Hampshire, small businesses that have not had export staffs and they don't have robust support services to do this, and they've grown exponentially because of the work that they've done in partnership with federal agencies like SBA. So I'm excited for what's ahead of you, and for those that do the work and have been engaging and providing the services or receiving them, thank you. So thank you to all our panelists, and I'll turn it back to you, Brad.
Thank you very much, Mike. All exceptionally good points there. Whether a pandemic or not, sometimes a pivot to exploring the possibility of exporting can be a huge benefit to just about any business. I've spoken to several businesses in the past, and many of them always, their first initial response is, I'm too small or I'm too new. And in many cases, that could be it, but it also doesn't have to be it. I've talked with businesses that started off exporting. They started off exporting, and it's just a mom and pop business, just the two of them, so to initially think that you may be too small or too new, I think is just a lack of knowledge of the resources available and how everything can work, because when you first think of, I don't know the language, I don't know what country to go to, can be intimidating. But there are resource partners that can help us. Maine International Trade Center, our resource partners, SCORE, SBDC, the Women's Business Center, the Veteran Business Outreach Center as well, all provide services to help you be able to gain the knowledge you need to build your confidence to make that next step in exporting or in government contracting or in whatever it is that you're trying to do. So this week with Export Week, it's going to be a 4-session system set up. So today's session 1, and we'll have a session the next 3 days, all starting at 11:30, approximately 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Today's session will be the longest one because we want to allow our guest experts, the small business exporters, to be able to share their experience and perhaps inspire you, perhaps also provide some roadblocks that may have ran into in the whole exporting and in their experience overall, to help you possibly make a decision to go forward with it and explore exporting a little bit more. So the next session tomorrow is Export Assistance Resource Partner Panel. We'll have resource partners come in and talk about what they do and how they can assist you in your export venture, as well as different things that you will want to be thinking about when you're getting started or expanding or growing further down the road in exporting as well. And then Wednesday, session 3, will be Export Business Planning, presented by Grace Mo Phillips, who's with us today as well as a subject matter expert and being a small business exporter. And then Thursday, session 4, Obtaining Capital for Your Export Business. That's going to be presented by Joe Raycraft from our Office of International Trade, and along with Camden National Bank and the Exim Bank as well. So we have a really great lineup of sessions for you this week. And I do have to ask that you register for each one. Registering for today, unfortunately, doesn't get you into the next one. So if you would, follow that same link, go back into Eventbrite and register for those other ones as well. And we hope to see you at those ones also. So today's guest experts and small business exporters that will be talking with us and sharing their stories is Grace Mo Phillips from Bella Cove, Brian Williams from Montevello, and Stephanie Millette Wayside Publishing, which I'd also like to add. Wayside Publishing is Maine and New England veteran-owned Small Business of the Year 2020. So I would like to go first. Grace, would you be first to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your business?
Sure, thanks, Brad. So hi, everybody. My name is Grace Phillips, and suddenly I see a big screen of myself. So I'm just gonna try to minimize my face so I don't have to look at myself. But so yes, I am a small business owner, and to this date, I am considering myself a solopreneur. I started Bell Cove back in 2014. It really started out of a simple passion for lobster, really. I remember back in 1998, I believe, I was living in Colorado, but in a supermarket out in Boulder, they sold live lobster, and they will cook it at the store there too. And that was a very new concept for me, at least back in those days. And I would just, pick up a lobster, have them cooked there, and I drove really quickly to the foothill in the Rocky Mountains, and I just ate outside with the lobster juice dripping down on my sleeve, but that was amazing. And so I have a really fond and vivid memory of eating Maine lobster back in Colorado. And until I moved to Maine, I got some friends who own lobster pound, in Portland area, and I reached out to them in 2008. So that was, almost 10 years later. I said, hey, do you guys, want to export lobsters, overseas? Because I really think there's a market there. And back then they were saying that, no, the mortality rate is too high. We are not interested. And I kind of dropped that idea then. But several years later, that desire still came back to me. And so 2014, I said, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to just do it. And my initial plan was really not to export lobster, but to create my own retail lobster products. I had a background in product development, and I wanted to, creating new products is, is something that it kind of run in my blood then. And so I thought that there's a market there, I'm going to do it. And I did a lot of research and how to really, have a production facility going. And but for the lack of capital, it was deemed not feasible at that time. So I had to pivot my idea and, turn it into, hey, I may not be producing my own lobster products, but, lobster processing is, coming into Maine. So why don't I work with the processors and export their products instead? So I quickly turned myself, into a exporter. As I said, I was in product development for home products. If you go to Macy's home department, you will see, home decor products. Those were the products that I developed. But lobster, I knew nothing about it. I cold called lobster processors in Maine, and I met with very helpful people who knew I knew nothing about lobsters, but they took me and gave me tours of their facilities and educate me lobster languages, really from the elementary level. What is a chick? What is quarters? What is half? Soft shells versus hard shell and all of that. And I got my support from the local processing communities. So now I have to do my work to really reach out to find customers overseas. I remember I found my first overseas customers by just doing online research, really organic, zero cost research. And I found a list of buyers from the Alaskan seafood event. And I got that list, I just cold called them, emailed them, and that's how I got my first customer. And to this day, he is still my customer from Hong Kong. So No, but I started off with very little capital. I started off with just a couple $1,000, and it was a slow start, I have to say. In 2014, I was still, trying to get my foot in the door, and I decided that, there was good thing. I did research and understand that there are resources out there, and I took advantage of a USDA market access program, and I went to my first international trade show in 2016, and that's where everything came together. I can talk more about that program later on, but it's a cost sharing program that allows me to exhibit in international trade shows, and I got a few more customers there, and slowly, things really picked up for me. And so now I export to 5 countries in Asia, and I started last year. I also started to export into Maine, and I'm looking ahead. I'm looking, to expand into the EU market as well. So that's pretty much the snapshot of, how I started the business. So back to you, Barrett.
Excellent. Thank you, Grace. Appreciate that. Next, I'd like to hear from Brian Williams of Montvelo.
Give me 1 second. He had to leave, and then he's joining right now.
Oh, okay. I was just looking at the screen. I didn't see him anymore. I thought my technical issues were progressing on me. So Brian, if you would, please take a few minutes to talk a little bit about Montvelo and your business and your involvement there.
Yeah, so Montalvo here, we've been around. This is actually, we're celebrating our 75th anniversary. So been around for quite a while. We're a manufacturer of components and machinery for a wide range of industries in the manufacturing sector. Our components get used in machines that produce food packaging, anywhere from like Pringles cans, fast food bags, boxes, pouches, and other flexible packaging, tags, labels, non-woven materials like masks, medical gowns, diapers, cardboard for boxes for shipments, or bubble or air packaging that's in those boxes, Band-Aids, medical wraps, to carbon fiber. So basically our components and the machines we build ensure everyone is really able to get the stuff that they interact with daily. So we're a worldwide company. We're headquartered here in Gorham, Maine. And then we have actual a sales office in Europe and in China as well, in Shanghai. So our solutions are all over the world, and our mission is to become sort of the leading supplier of web tension control, web handling, and processing equipment. On the export front, one of the things we like to brag about very often is one of our highest export markets is China. We're generally, over the course of the last decade or so, everyone hears about how much we import from these other areas, whereas actually we're the ones exporting to China. Last year we won the International Trade Center's Exporter of the Year award. And so our main export markets are, like I said, China and Europe, and that's why we've got our efforts there. As you heard in the opening, one of the other key parts for us when it comes to exporting is exactly that. One of the huge benefits has been sort of that mitigating factor of fluctuating sort of sales. So where North America is definitely our strongest market. If we experience a little dip in activity, we'll have the export market that levels us off or helps carry us through a rough time, as well as the general growth and activity of like the Chinese market, for example, which over the past few years has been on a rapid growth curve. So it really helps, these other markets helps to smooth out any bumps that we experience along the way. And that's what we're kind of doing in a rebuilding mode when it comes to Europe right now, with the team over there and the activities and focus on the market over there. I was just actually at a composites trade show in Paris last week. So fully focused on increasing our presence in Europe, the awareness of the company and what we do, and ultimately the exports that we put over there. But again, if Europe was a stronger market for us right now, I'm sure you know in the news what's going on in China and especially Shanghai right now. Like they're just getting hammered. Like they're not producing anything. They can't produce anything. They can't do anything. So, if Europe was at that same level, then we would have been able to rely on Europe to help balance out, the stuff going on in China. They're on their way up there. And then best case scenario is all three markets are chugging along, and everyone's excited and the growth and everything's happening. But it's certainly one of a key strategies of our export markets in general is all three markets ultimately are there to support each other. And it's like that family members, and one of you's down, the other one's there to pick you back up, get you through the tough time until you get back on your feet again. So yeah, other in terms of other sort of export activity, yeah, we do the other continents as well, but definitely not to the same degree. Always keeping an eye out for information from SBA or the International Trade Center and webinars to just keep up to date on the changing regulations or rules or export codes. So there's a fair amount that goes into it, but there's, as I talked about at the beginning, there's lots of resources that you can stay informed about on all those changes. Yeah. So, any other areas you want to go or want me to go on that?
Excellent. That's good for right now. We'll go on to Stephanie. She'll speak a few minutes, and then we'll try to do some questions as well from the attendees and each other as well. So Stephanie, if you would go ahead and take a few minutes, and thank you for your service, by the way. And you are still muted.
Go.
There we go.
I will make sure to pass the thank you on to our owner. Greg Gruhl is the veteran and owner of Wayside Publishing, and we do prioritize veteran hires as well. So I think I don't know what our last stat was, but we're an education company who hires veterans, which is pretty cool. What I feel like Wayside Publishing is always a fascinating addition to export related conversations because we fit that kind of business that you mentioned, Brad, that was hesitant to raise our hand and approach the Maine International Trade Center because we were interested in international markets, but had no idea where to start. And sometimes that lack of even having the lingo with which you can pose your question keeps you from asking the question. Luckily, because of our connections with the Small Business Administration, we felt kind of comfortable when we saw that Maine International Trade Center partners with SBA enough so that we could make some initial introductions last summer. And thank God we did, because SBA and Maine International Trade Center have been just incredible resources for our small business in the past 8 months. So Wayside Publishing creates what you can kind of see on my virtual background behind me. We create textbooks for world language classrooms across the United States and now across the world. We primarily create textbooks for high schools. And when I say, across the United States, I mean like adopted by the state of Texas, Florida, California. And so we're an unknown entity here in Maine with a pretty huge national impact. We compete against McGraw-Hill, Pearson, Cengage, some pretty large publishers. And we're doing so from a virtual office based out of Freeport. We also create online products so that if a teacher wants to either teach entirely virtually or using online systems, all of our products, so these textbooks that are here are also fully digital, with activities and homework and things that a student can record online so that then their teacher can grade it, all within their learning management system, their LMS. So in the educational world, we have the American market pretty well understood. We understand that when we go into a new state, we need to figure out what grades do students take a world language within. So we've probably all of us have taken a world language in high school. And for me, I took it starting in 7th grade through 12th grade. But that varies state to state by state requirement, what languages they offer, and how they prove that a student can actually pass and get an A. All of those things vary entirely. They have different standards and rubrics and different requirements for their teachers. And we've been identifying in the past 2 years that we can't rest on our laurels and say, okay, the American market is where it's at and where it's going to make it or break it for us. If we want to be successful, we also have to start differentiating our revenue streams and looking at other markets. So we started to look international, looking at markets like Canada and like Scandinavia, where the sequence of grades where a student takes world language matches the American market. So in Canada and Scandinavia, they are taking world languages, largely the same world languages that an American student would take at the same grades, where in other countries or other parts of the world, you may be taking a second language starting in preschool or kindergarten, and a secondary textbook like what we provided wouldn't make sense for you. So we figured, let's start small, let's look north, let's look to Canada. How do we start? How do we start doing this research? And that's where in the past 8 months, Maine International Trade Center and the SBA funded STEP grants have really made a difference for us. We learned that we couldn't even start sending samples across the border online or in print until first we'd gone through all of the pictures, every single picture in a textbook, any audio in an online site, and checked that the copyright had worldwide rights so that they can be internationally distributed. We did an assessment and realized 75% of our resources did not have worldwide rights. So we had to go out to all of these, the areas that collect these audio links or that like Shutterstock, and we had to go out to them and we had to actually repurchase these rights. And that is hugely expensive. So to make sure that we could do that, that was our first STEP grant that we applied for. And I can go into details on like how kind of we assessed our needs and went through that process and the conversations that we had in detail if anyone is interested in that. But that's one example for us that that right off the bat got us able to start drafting our product over the border into Canada. From there, we took advantage of a Maine International Trade Mission to go actually out to Canada and meet with the DOE which is not the Department of Education, the Ministry of Education of Ontario. We learned about the different education structures in Canada versus the United States because they're very different. And we started to talk to them very extensively about their digital export laws because so much of what we do is online. And so where student data and student privacy are concerned, there are stringent policies and standards in Canada, just like in the United States. However, they're worded differently. They have different standards for their privacy and they look at different things and they assess different things that you do on the back end and your technical side. So your development team has to be well in sync with your export plans. And so we did a lot with different attorneys and agencies in Canada around digital privacy laws. And then Canada has anti-spam laws that are very aggressive, a little bit more aggressive than GDPR in Europe. So we had to do a lot of digging there, also using a grant to guide us on understanding how we could send out marketing emails to thousands of teachers across Canada and not get sued. So, and that is still kind of a learning in progress, not getting sued, but figuring out exactly how to roll out things so that they're efficient for an American marketing and sales team to start raising awareness in Canada. And so for us, this is very much just getting the plane off the ground. We just attended our first conference in Canada. I've got all this learning fresh in my mind, so but I don't want to go into too much detail for folks who are not in education or not interested in digital exporting, but I can go into a lot of detail should anyone have interest, or share links after the webinar should anyone want to access our research and not be a competitor of mine.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was great.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the introductions of each of the small business exporters that are joining us today. I have a couple questions that I was writing down as each one of you were speaking and stuff that I'll probably bring up, but I also welcome at this time any of our attendees to feel free to put questions in the chat, and we can read those and address those by our small business panel as well. And of course, if any of the small business exporters, Grace, Steve, Stephanie, or Brian, have questions for each other, that's more than welcome as well. So when Grace was talking, you were saying that you basically found your first contact outside of the U.S. from another trade show, the Alaskan trade show, and then just cold call people. That takes some guts to do. Cold calling in general, it can be very tough. It can be very intimidating because you don't know the person on the other end, or the kind of attitude they may have and stuff. So that was an exceptional way, I think, to take the initiative to go out and do it. As far as finding that new contact, it sounds like, Stephanie, your business is maybe chose Canada as close proximity. Was there anything else that had inspired you to choose them other than just being of a close proximity?
Yes, for us, it was not only the close proximity, but also I think if we had to pick between Canada and Scandinavia as our first export foray, we reached out to the Maine International Trade Center and we're talking to them about the similarities between the two markets, and felt that a Canadian learner might make the most. So you imagine a textbook written for an American kid or any American, and you're going to be referring to things that are familiar to that teenager, from Target to just, to Starbucks, and trying to think of actually less global brands, because the Scandinavian would know Starbucks too. But just the North American regionalism, we figured that might be more prevalent in Canada than Scandinavia. Also market size. So looking at the number of enrolled learners who take French as a second language in Canada compared to some of the Scandinavian markets that we'd had to do country by country in their enrollments are just smaller. So it was the biggest piece of the pie for the world language market for us to go to first.
Excellent, thank you. And then a follow-up question that Peter put into the chat for us, and anyone can answer as well. Many small businesses stumble with that very first challenge of who would want to buy my product in what countries and such. Do any of you have any hints on how to find that good market that would be a good fit for your product?
I think reaching out to the Maine International Trade Center team with your first question, like when talking about market size and how to define market size, when we reached out last summer, their team created a pretty substantial memo for us on where we could find certain numbers and enrollments, and how we could start making some connections and checks. So when determining market size, should you not be aware of where international markets store their data? MITC, I don't want to speak for them, but for us anyway, we're willing to kind of take the time and do that digging and let us know where to start looking.
Yeah, for me as well, MITC play a very important part in helping me identify, target market as well. And if anyone who has a product idea, right, they can go to MITC and say, these are the products that I want to export to. They can run reports, by country, and help you at least narrow down, what are the target countries, and it's a great resource. If I knew what I knew now, I probably would have a easier start, when I started the business. So I, highly recommend reaching out to MITC. They are just a very resourceful organization to help anyone started exporting.
Excellent. Brian, would you like to add?
Yeah, so I try to put it in perspective of, what would I do now? Because like as I mentioned earlier, I inherited a pretty healthy sort of worldwide presence. And, being in the sort of manufacturing space, machinery space, it's trying to find first, almost kind of running some Google searches, like who for us are the OEMs, where are machines getting made, what are the big markets, and looking into the research reports on where equipment's getting made, and that would probably say, Germany, UK, some of the markets that we know are big, where there's a lot of manufacturing presence. And so that's where through that research we can kind of determine, okay, where's equipment getting made? So where are the OEMs we should then go after, because that's one market segment. Who's got the largest contingent of OEMs? And that starts to paint some of the picture. And then it's also maybe going a little step further. Who are the customers of my customers, and trying to do some research on that. What are the industries? Like for us, it's pulp and paper, composites, flexible packaging. Well, all these places or all these industries generally have, one or two sort of top industry publications. The nonwovens industry is big. The big one is Nonwovens Industry Magazine. So yeah, not too hard to find them. Or Flexible Packaging Magazine, or JEC or Camex for the composites world. So then you can start going out to these industry publications, who also usually have supplier guides and other information. You can just kind of start reading through, familiarizing yourself with these publications and what they're talking about. And then as you start to go through that, maybe certain countries or areas keep popping up all the time. And again, the picture gets painted a little bit more for you. Certainly using, MITSI to help with some of that research. So yeah, there's definitely all these little different areas that when you start pulling information from each, it starts to just paint the clearer picture for you on where you need to go after. Like for us, like let's say composites, which is a generally new thing. All right, I go to these publications and I see, where North America stands compared to Europe, compared to Asia. Okay, Asia's just kind of starting out. Europe's a little bit more established. Okay, so I'm maybe not going to have to try as hard in Europe. So now I'm going to start focusing more on Europe. Okay, well, where are the major segments? Is it France? Is it Germany? Is it UK? And again, just drips and drabs, putting the pieces together, and it starts to make it a little bit clearer on where you might want to start off at.
Excellent. And Brian, your Montvello company has grown rather large and has a pretty good footprint worldwide now. Do you have a section within your company that is a team that's always looking for the next market somewhere in the world, or do you contract that out to someone, or do you use Mitzi as well? How do you do that at your level of business?
I'd say we've done it a couple different ways. The first is, with the sales team, marketing person, just say, our regular communications, what's the word on the street? What are people hearing? We, on all of our sales, we do tag all the customers with what industry they're in. So quarterly, we're looking at, where is the business coming from? All of a sudden, if one's starting to emerge, right, you're kind of seeing pulp and paper come down, composites, nonwovens, flexible packaging come up. It's some of those trends that say, okay, time to go more after this industry. Now, where is that industry? And sort of that word on the street. And then also what we've done in some other areas is, when I look at 3D printing, I've done it a couple of different ways. I've certainly reached out to Mitzi on one occasion. Those publications I was talking about, having met some of them and worked some of like the editors and stuff along the way, asking them, hey, what do you guys see as the up and coming industry? Where are you seeing things? As well as the articles, they talk about recycling carbon fiber as a big thing, or just 3D printing as a big thing. So it gives us, the answer is not there, but at least you get pointed in the right direction. And once we've got some directions identified, that's when we use the different tactics of whether it's a full market research program, which usually just consists of one person anyway, so I don't want anyone to think it's super crazy. Just kind of doing some research, Google searches, publications, call some of them up. What do they got going on? Again, it's all just putting the pieces together until ultimately we now know what's going in this market. If people are ever curious about a market, the Google search I'd recommend is, industry name and then CAGR, CAGR. And that will spit out different results that say, how industries are growing. Just stands for compound annual growth rate. So that's where you can start researching different industries that way to see who is up and coming, who is predicted, over the next 5-10 years to be the next big spot.
Well, that's a really good point to push out too, with the CAGR behind the industry when you're doing your Google searches, and how that can provide more industry knowledge around those different markets and where those markets might be at. So in addition, Stephanie had mentioned MITC, and so did all three of the panelists this morning. The Maine International Trade Center, who will have a representative tomorrow to talk more in depth about what they do. As you can see, or as you can hear from our panelists, they do a tremendous lot to help in every aspect of you exporting when it comes to finding those global markets and even getting those grant funds through the STEP program. We had a question come in from Roland, who had asked, have you used trade shows or conferences to determine where to target your activities? Grace, would you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Roland, yes, overseas trade shows definitely helped me, gain or expand my customer base a lot. And I utilized, like I mentioned earlier, the USDA Market Access Program in conjunction with the STEP program that Stephanie was talking about. And it's really helpful for a small business like myself, because your overseas trade show expenses can be covered by up to 50%. And so it really, for a small business, you have limited resources, but that's the way to, in a lot of countries, unfortunately, people still value the face-to-face interaction. They want to see you in order to, to validate your business. And so those fundings really help me, just to, to compete with bigger companies, right? And it's really easy to use those funds, and the people are there they're really supportive, and you can sign up for additional help as well. Like, for instance, the SBA STEP program, it's just not, it's not just for trade shows. If you have a website, you need to translate into a different language, which I did utilize, to put in a foreign language. Those expenses were covered as well. So this year, I'm looking at translating them in my website into Spanish, for instance, and I'll be utilizing the STEP program to do that. And but to get back to your questions, yes, when you meet with your prospective customers at trade shows, you get to know what the market is looking for as well, and what the customers into, and you can, really try to focus. When you have only a couple of markets that you are targeting, you know what they're looking for. And I certainly use those, intelligence to help shape my product offerings to the markets. And when I send out email blasts, for instance, that's, I use those information that I gain from trade shows and conferences to really pinpoint what my customers might be looking for. And MITC also have the trade missions that Stephanie talked about. Great programs. You are going to a place that you meet with 10, 12 different buyers that it would take me a long time to even find those buyers. So those are really like kind of a shortcut, way to get to, your target customers. And so I think, those really made a difference, for my growth in the, in the early stage.
Excellent. As Brian had pointed out, doing that market research in different ways through different publications and Google searches, that can take a bit of time to go through, but it's well worth it. So you're finding more specifically who those markets are that have a good chance of buying your product from you. And then the Maine International Trade Center has been mentioned several times. They have international trade specialists that can also help determine that for you as well. And find that kind of stuff out before you go to a trade show in a certain country is so beneficial, because then you already know you have a good potential market there. Attending trade shows at various locations, not necessarily setting up a booth, but going there yourself to see what kinds of people from what locations are attending those can help do some of that research for you as well. A question came in from Holly for Grace. Have there been any barriers around food safety requirements? And what resources have been helpful in understanding and overcoming any barriers?
Yeah, thank you, Holly. This is a great question. I just had an experience with, what you described. Yes, food safety is really important. So try to keep the story short. I've been exporting to Asia, never had any issue with the products I export, except for, maybe a couple cases that is not the right product, nothing major, right? So last year when I started to export to Spain, same products, lobster products, and the customer was not happy. And they did not like the aesthetic of the product for whatever reason. And so, what I learned is what is considered acceptable in Asia was not acceptable in Spain. So that was, something that I learned as I went. But, the customer was upset, and they were, threatening to cancel, the order that was on the water already. And so I reached out to MITC, again, MITC, they are the lifesaver. And I also reached out to NOAA to really get educated, what the issue really was. As it turned out, that I sold raw lobster products, and the customer were expecting the standard of a cooked, ready to serve products. So there was a gap in the understanding of the rules and regulations. And fortunately, I was not at fault, So, but, your question is right. Yes, definitely. There are things that we have to, when you're in the food or agriculture industry, you have to understand what the requirements are. And there are requirements. For instance, if I export lobster to Thailand, they require the processing plant to have a third-party audited food safety certification. And a lot of times, a lot of seafood processors do not have that kind of certification simply because of cost, right? And so it limits me as to who I can buy products from to export to Thailand. So yes, definitely there are barriers, but there are resources out there to help you. It really depends on what product you are exporting. In my case, I work with seafood, so NOAA is my go-to, and MITC definitely. Even if they don't have answer to particular questions, they refer me to someone who is in Spain to help address those concerns that I had, and so I can talk more about that, offline. But those are some of the examples that I use to help me, guide me in the exporting of seafood products. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And over the past few years, everybody's heard about different tariffs and trade agreements and things like that, the average small business owner isn't going to know how to work through those things. Stephanie, would you be able to talk a little bit about any kind of impacts the U.S., Canadian, and Mexico treaty or trade agreements have affected or not affected your business?
Sure. So like many American small businesses, suddenly Canadian exporting physically is more attractive to us because we have many of our duties and tariffs waived. And one of the STEP grants that we acquired through the SBA was to work with Butterfield. I forget what Kelly Butterfield's business is, and I regret that because she was such a huge help to us. But Kelly Butterfield, she's based out of Portland, worked in UPS and for her entire career, and now helps Maine small businesses figure out how to start exporting in large volumes. And so she kind of helped us take advantage of the dam being lifted, so that now things can go across the border with less expense to American businesses, and also helps guide us on how to make those initial export carrier negotiations, because so much of our business had been with American-based account reps at UPS, DHL, and FedEx that we didn't even realize that we had the opportunity to set up an additional account manager on the international export side to negotiate so that our fees across the board would be decreased, and to look into non-resident importer status as a business when we filed in Canada, so that our teachers, when you send a box to a teacher, just like in the US, that teacher may be in the middle of a very large building. And so suddenly if they're accepting a package and have to sign for it, and that person can't be found because they're the importer of record, there were a number of hassles that we were hearing from our staff who had worked at competitors who had stopped exporting purely because of the hassle. And so starting with UPS, DHL, and FedEx, and kind of making sure that we had gone through the right channels and filed as a non-resident importer, helped us make sure that we got our packages straight to customers who were part of larger addresses and who really just needed the box delivered and left. And so if anyone's exporting to Canada and wants that pro tip, look at becoming a non-resident importer.
Excellent. Excellent. That is a very good tip. And then I know Grace and Brian, you both mentioned that you export to Asia and China. Have you had any issues there exporting to those areas? As far as government issues or tariffs and stuff like that?
Yeah, especially on a few of our product lines, just kind of based on the codes, we get hit with pretty extensive tariffs on a few product lines, specifically to China. And because we have our office in China and we really feed everything for Asia to that office and then out, we've certainly at times, depending on the other country, let's say it's Malaysia or Taiwan or a different area, sometimes we will actually have to go direct because it's too expensive to then go to China first and then the other country. So yeah, certainly we're always keeping an eye out for the tariffs and then how to navigate that situation. And so yeah, find ourselves exporting directly as well. And then obviously working through the numbers and everything to determine, okay, what's the additional cost involved with that? What are their rules? What are our rules? Their rules for importing versus our rules, for exporting. And do we need to change anything? Does it need to be a different code for them? So there definitely can be some sort of tricky waters to navigate there. And for us, because of those tariffs, I mean, it's kind of what they are there for in some cases, is they make us non-competitive. So we're always keeping an eye out for that as well.
Excellent. Another question, that is typically asked by someone new to exporting is, how do I get paid? If I'm selling to Europe, or if I'm selling to Canada, or if I'm selling to somewhere else and they have a different currency, how am I getting paid? How does that process work? How do you get paid for your sales?
I will say, for us, especially internationally, we use pro formas as the main sort of transaction tool, versus issuing credit or sales on terms, just because it can be much trickier to navigate, to not get paid up front. And then in terms of the currency, perhaps Stephanie or Grace have better examples, but that for us really just comes down to the banking partner and how they're able to deal with international funds or the customer's bank. For us, we established that we accept USD over here, or euro in Europe, and generally we leave it on the customer to kind of navigate that transfer of funds versus us having to do any exchanges.
And for me, there are transactions that, while we always quote in US dollars, there might be benefits of quoting in the foreign currency if the market is really competitive. But for for my own security, so to speak, right? We want to make sure that we are keeping or avoid the currency fluctuation. I always quote in US dollar. And the way to collect, we have huge transactions that I had to collect, cash upfront before I ship. But there are also opportunities where I have customers who I've been doing business with. We can pay by, we can collect by letter of credit, which is a very secure way of getting paid. But started last year, I also took advantage of the Exim Bank Export Credit Insurance Program. The Exim Bank can guarantee up to 95% invoice value, for any non-payments. So that has been a huge plus for my expansion into Spain, because I am not familiar with that market there. I'm more familiar with some of the Asian countries that I deal with and the customers that I work with. So that was a huge help. And so I think Thursday too, I think someone from Exim Bank is going to talk more about that program. And I think I learned about that program through another webinar. So that was a great help for me. And I do highly recommend people look into that program.
Excellent.
In addition to both of those steps, which would play into 75% or more of our revenue volume, we also have some of these to my left, right? Those little chapter books. The consumers for those buy piecemeal. So they're teachers who are looking for a couple chapter books for their classroom. And so we wanted a very set it and forget it system for them and for accepting payment for them. And so we just use our Shopify platform, our e-commerce platform Shopify, and we bought a conversion tool. If our volume increases, we may create a second Shopify store for Canadian customers, which is a step you can take so that everything for them happens with Canadian currency and a Canadian bank, which is sometimes a Canadian's preference. But we've found that most teachers are so used to buying American product, they haven't been off-put yet by our approach. But we simply used a Shopify conversion app. You can go into the Shopify App Store and type in conversion tool. You can try a bunch of different ones. We found one that worked the best for our store. But that looks at the IP address of your consumer, shows them the currency, lets them know that their transaction when they check out will be in USD, but walks them through everything that they need to know, and makes their checkout process easier. And after looking at our cart traffic, we did notice that teachers were more likely to complete checking out from Canada after we put that in place. So if anyone sells in that style or model, then you may want to just take that easy step.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. That's very informative. And when it comes to financing and the bank to banks, do you have to have a foreign bank involved, or can you still rely on a local community bank like Bangor Savings Bank or Gorham Savings Bank, or even a credit union, Infinity Federal Credit Union here, or Infinity Credit Union has changed a little bit? Can you stick with your typical bank or credit union that you use here to interact with those financial transactions, or is there more in depth that you have to go with that?
Well, I work with a local bank. I work with Bangor Savings, and so whenever we receive wire transfer from overseas customers, they work through another bank, but money comes through my account directly, not an issue at all. But I have to say, when it comes to letter of credits, not all banks deal with letter of credit. So the local banks might not have the resources to help. Might have to reach out to certain banks, larger banks, their global finance services to handle letter of credits. But for a lot of my wire transfer payments and collections, it's a local bank is more than sufficient.
Excellent. And Grace, you had also mentioned Export-Import Bank, or otherwise known as Exim Bank, as well, and they will be on Thursday assisting Joe Raycraft and Camden National Bank in presenting the obtaining capital for your small business venture. And so I do look forward to them talking more about those programs as well. So we've talked a lot about Maine International Trade Center. We mentioned a little bit with the Small Business Development Center and our other resource partners, Women's Business Center and SCORE and the Veteran Business Outreach Centers that can help with different aspects of your business and your exporting ventures. Have any of you used other resource partners that we haven't discussed that can also help?
Sure. In the past 8 months, we researched, okay, so I mentioned Kelly Butterfield, but we also reached out to a woman, and she was connected to us through these contacts through this network that we're describing here. But her name was Mona Tessier, Welch LLP. There are webinars that she's done with the SBA and MITC and SCORE. And there's the big one, guys. You'll all know it. It's based out of Brunswick, and they help with community small business growth too. I'll remember them because they also, yes.
MITC?
No,
MTI?
Yes. So they're another like great resource to go to as well. And they had also used the same woman, but Mona Tessier, Tessier. She was fantastic on walking through, if you're doing Canada specifically, in understanding Canadian tax and what you need to charge to each person, particularly if you have an online product or a physical product. And she was very good at like kind of doing the research on the back end to help decipher the evolving laws there. And then Hauser Henry was a Canadian firm that we reached out to about digital marketing laws. So we reached out to them and described our scenarios. Hey, this is how we sell to American teachers. This is what our marketing flow is, our funnel pipeline. This is what it looks like. We understand we have to comply with Canadian anti-spam law. How do we become just as successful selling without having our folks cold call Canadian teachers, which no teacher, no human wants? What do we do? And so they looked into the law, which is it's a blurry case law. It's very recent in the past 10 years. So they're still kind of, even attorneys are figuring out how to advise businesses on it. But they created a legal memo that we can use as a training foundation for our staff. So that was another resource that we accessed when just getting our processes off the ground and getting our staff understanding how they could also start making these international contacts.
Excellent.
And for me, last year I applied for a SBA Export Express loan, and it was a new game changer for me. As a small business, I consistently struggle with, account receivables and account payables, customer. I was hoping that I can extend terms to customers, and yet my suppliers, need payments upfront, right? So there's always a gap between my receivables and accountable. So I reach out to SBA, to inquire about getting a business loan and in form of a line of credit. And it really helped me that I could now, with that line of credit in my back pocket, I can work with a broader base of suppliers, who would require me to pay, as soon as I get the products. And it allows me the time to, to get the products shipped to overseas, which can take 30, 40 some days before I can collect. So, that fills that gap of, payment issues, and Joe had been very helpful in guiding me the process, and helping me, identify which SBA loan product is right for my business. So that was, that was really, I'm looking forward to this year. I think I can work with a lot more suppliers, with some ammunition in my back pocket, so to speak, that, it would be a good help.
I'll just add, in addition to ones that were already mentioned, there's also a company, they won one of the International Trade Centers Awards last year as well. It's a company called Navitrade, and they help with, especially if you're getting whether you're getting new into exporting or you're established and you're exchanging funds, and by the time you're putting money up front to make the product and stuff, by the time you get paid and everything, they just help provide some like credit risk and political insurance stuff. It's just another resource to kind of help mitigate some of the risk when it comes to the export world.
Yes, definitely. And Navitrade is going to be joining us tomorrow for the panel discussion on resources available. To elaborate a little bit more on what Grace was saying with the SBA loan guarantees that she received. If you're not familiar with the SBA, outside of disaster, we don't actually lend money, but we guarantee it through participating lenders. And there's several different guarantee programs. There's 3 of those that are export related as well, that you'll also find out a lot more about on Wednesday when Joe Raycraft, who Grace had referenced, is presenting or actually Thursday, sorry, reference about the obtaining capital for your small business. And he'll go more in depth on it, but the process, it basically starts at your current lender or at a business lender that is an SBA guaranteed lender. If for some reason your application doesn't meet their policies for approval, then they can look at using an SBA guarantee to help make the deal happen to get you those funds. And in this case, with an export guarantee, those are 90% guarantees toward the bank. So it's really helping inspire the bank more to help get those funds to you as an exporter. And those those funds can be used for just about anything within your business that's going towards exporting. And like I said, Joe will go more in depth on that on Thursday. Did you want to mention something real quick, Joe?
Yeah, Brad, I'll jump in. Yeah, thanks. Again, I'm Joe Raycraft from the SBA, and no, exactly right, Brad, in terms of working through your lenders on this. And these, you'll find out on Thursday, these export loan programs are really beneficial. They're really specifically designed for small businesses to help you compete overseas. Export loans, if you go to your bank and ask for some export working capital, typically the bank is going to say, well, we can't lend against your foreign export receivables. It's an ineligible piece of collateral. So if they have that SBA guarantee to lean on, that's what makes it eligible for the lender. So these are things that, again, help companies access financing that may not otherwise be available to them. So now you're able to compete with, much larger companies that have, much greater access to capital. For companies like Grace's, that's kind of a wholesaler, manufacturers like Brian, or, companies like Stephanie's that, you're providing product, service. It really is relevant to all those types of businesses. We've got, strictly service-based providers that take advantage of these programs as well. So hopefully some of you will be able to tune in on Thursday for a little bit more detail.
Excellent. Thank you for jumping in there. Albert, I just saw that Alberto had put a question in the chat too, towards Grace. You mentioned it takes almost 30 days to get paid. Is that because the funds are in escrow until the customer has received the product?
Thanks, Alberto. It's a great question. There are several ways to collect, right? I mentioned earlier, if we're lucky, we can get cash upfront before we ship anything. But a lot of times it doesn't work out that way with customers because there's, it's a mutual trust issue. Sometimes, you don't trust them just as much as they don't trust you also, right? So, I try to offer some form of terms to my existing customers. A lot of times what we do is when a customer confirms an order, they will put in a deposit, 30%, 25%, whatever that might be. And I ship the products out. And once I ship the products, I will have documents proving that I shipped the products. For instance, the bill of lading, any export certifications or inspection certifications. So the customer would know that they got paid. And usually before the products arrive, they will have to pay the balance before I release those documents. And because I work with Asia a lot, it takes from Boston to Asia, any port in Asia, usually it can take at least 40 days to get there. So in essence, once I ship the products, I don't get paid for another 40 days, right? Until the customer paid. And that is the reason why I said I don't get paid, until 30 days or so after I ship. I do not have to put in, the funds in escrow, but that was the reason. Again, that was why the SBA loan in form of the line of credit really helps fill that gap, that 30-day gap, when I already have to pay my suppliers for the products.
Excellent. Great question. So to change it up a little bit, most of you, I believe, were selling domestically prior to selling internationally. Grace, did you sell domestically before, or you just straight went to selling, exporting?
Yeah, I'm 100% exporting business. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Then for Stephanie and Brian, once you made that decision and you did all your research and you made that first sale into exporting, how has exporting impacted your business compared to only selling domestically?
Yes, I mean, for us, the easiest thing to talk about is the financial impacts, right? It just, it takes your box and it makes it that much bigger. So there's just a lot more opportunity to go after. So in terms of how it's changed the business, it's just created more sales opportunities and business opportunities out there. Beyond that, I mean, it's really shaped everything from our processes to our culture to our marketing and everything else, right? We can't go after China the same way we can go after them here, just from even a website, right? It has to be hosted and everything over there. We can't just copy paste and say, oh no, they'll use our site. Well, they don't use Google, they use Baidu. So it's like we have to always be factoring those aspects into our marketing if we want to be successful over there, if we want to be exporting more over there. We have to play the game, by their rules. Similar, in Europe, sure, they'll use a lot of English, but Germans like German. So it's how do we come up with German AdWords and German literature, collateral stuff for them. So I mean, certainly from the marketing perspective, internally, 5 or 6 years ago, we sort of came up with a cultural catchphrase of one Montalvo, and this is something we still struggle with even today. It's very easy, given the headquarters is here, to be solely focused on what we're doing. It's like, oh, hold on, we've got guys in Europe, we've got guys in China. We need to bring them into the conversation. Product development, how is this going to be received in Europe? How is this going to be received in Asia? We can't just design a product that we think will be the best here that then they can't even sell over there because, well, there goes our exports, right? So it's constantly taking all of these inputs from all these other markets to make sure we are creating, global processes, global products, so that we, at the end of the day, we can take advantage of these additional sales opportunities, these additional market opportunities, and even down to how we communicate, because people in Asia communicate differently than they do here than they do in Europe. So again, that sort of one Montalvo mentality that we try to instill here. So certainly, the exporting activity has immensely impacted everything we do here.
Excellent. Stephanie, would you like to comment as well?
Sure. We're so much earlier along in the process. So for us, I think the biggest and right now only exporting to Canada. And so for us, yes, the point that that marketing and sales is hugely impacted by really having to be aware of what consumers, what their perspective is, what products they're looking for, and then what marketing they'll respond to and messaging they'll respond to, and what channels they use are all things that we're kind of growing into now. For me, one of the most reassuring things that I heard from SBA and from any other partner, MITC consistently, was that awareness that small businesses take on a lot of risk when they first start exporting, and because all of these marketing and sales adaptations are costly. It costs money to translate a website into French. And not just French, but Canadian regional French. And then it would cost money to translate it into French for the country of France, or to African French. And we all speak different dialects of English. And my consumer is language teachers, and they are your most critical readers of language. So and it's costly. It's costly to get it right. And there are services here in even just New England. Rapport is one based out of New Hampshire that a lot of Maine businesses frequently use, and that I've seen other webinars, because this was my world, watching these webinars 24/7 last summer. And Rapport was recommended as a consultant frequently, and we've had great experiences just getting quotes from them. For us, we haven't actually taken the plunge into investing in our translations yet. And that is because we are just starting to see the sales roll in, and then turn that revenue into the next wave of what we'll be doing in our next marketing improvements. I can't echo enough that sometimes even in your countries that speak the same languages that you speak or that your staff speak, their perspective of different, lingo and American isms, their intent is really sharp, just like what ours are when we look at businesses, and we can pretty quickly as a consumer identify that they are not an American business, or that they're not from Maine, and you just know, and that's fine. I don't think it's actually decreased our consumerism. The fact that you're aware of it and are just trying to communicate with them and provide their currency like they need it, or have marketing that shows, click here so that we can provide you Canadian standards. Sometimes we've been able to find shortcuts that are just making the point that, hey, if you're a Canadian consumer, we've developed a fact sheet for you or something for you. The last thing that I had written down, don't forget to mention this, is if you're going to Canada, be really careful of not taking shortcuts for Quebec. So right now we use Google to make sure that we are not advertising in Quebec, and our sales reps know that they cannot pursue Quebec because we don't have anything that's translated side by side French and English. And in Quebec, they have the most stringent business laws for websites that are developed. The rest of Canada, it's kind of a myth that you have to translate your entire website into French and English. But in Quebec, that is true. And so we do not market yet to Quebec because we haven't taken that step yet.
Awesome. So what we've heard from all three of the panelists today is there's a lot to exporting compared to your typical sales front. There's a lot of research involved, a lot of work overall. Is it worth it? Is exporting worth all the time and effort that you've put in to even make that first sale overseas?
I mean, yeah, it's like anything. It gets easier over time, especially anyone looking at this as the first venture. Like I said, it is a lot of work. It is a lot of research. It is a lot of time and effort. But like anything, it gets easier, and then the easier it gets, the more you focus on the dividends. So I mean, for us, kind of talked about at the beginning, it smooths out a lot of the bumps we experience. It gives the business overall a lot more vitality, because we're not so dependent on one thing or one region. It's improved the business, like I said, from the cultural aspect to our mindset and how we develop products. We're making better products because they're factoring in all these other areas as well. So I think, at the end of the day, not just sort of the financial side that it's said, yes, this is something we want to do. It's all those other benefits that it's brought to us as well.
Yes, great.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely worth it. I enjoy the thrill of exporting, but also, the business that I am in, small business, really the smallest of the small business. When I started, I understood that I had a competitive advantage, understanding the overseas market, as a BIPOC person, as immigrant person, longtime immigrant person, I understand the overseas consumer market and better than in the US, right? So I felt I have more competitive edge in the overseas market. And that is why I put in the work to export. Even though I did not know anyone in the industry, at least I know the consumer market, and that's how I started. And that has been really give me a lot of joy doing what I do.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I just want to add to what Brian had said, the getting additional markets and having these export markets, it helps make your business more sustainable. So if something happens in one market, you're not solely relying on them for your entire business, and it helps you be more sustainable. As time is running down, we have about 3 minutes left, and I'd like to thank all of our small business exporters, Grace, Stephanie, and Brian, for being here today and talking with us, sharing your stories and your insights that are very valuable. I think it's always best to hear directly from those who have experienced what the topic is that you're talking about. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. I hope that all those who are attended register for sessions 2, 3, and 4 over the next couple of days, and hear more from the resource partners that are available. Also, when Grace, thank you, and coming back to talk about export business planning, and then also the on the last day for the obtaining capital as well for your export business. So those are the next 3 sessions coming up. Please register, and I hope you join us. And thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate it.